Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lance Corporal Talia Keegan. We warmly welcome the members of the National Boys Choir of Australia who are joining us this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students from King Street Public School, New South Wales. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Llewelyn Samuel Downing. Llewelyn Downing, known as Sam, was born in 1889 to Joseph and Elizabeth Downing of Ruthin, North Wales. Sam grew up in Ruthin and later Denbigh, where his father worked as a railway station master. He was educated at the local national school and later at Ruthin Grammar School, becoming a motor mechanic. Sam Downing came to Australia in 1914, having accepted a lucrative and excellent post in Australia as the skipper of HMCG Lonehand, operating out of Port Darwin in the Northern Territory. He was not the only one of his large family to move overseas. By the time he was in Australia, 2 of his sisters had moved to Canada. War broke out not long after Sam Downing arrived in Australia. He described himself as reluctant to leave his good civilian job, but said, "Actuated by the highest motives of stern duty and the justice of the cause, I applied for a year's leave of absence and joined as private in the first contingent in history to leave the Northern Territory." Appointed to the 25th Battalion, Downing underwent a period of training in Australia before leaving for active service overseas in June 1915 on board the troop ship Aeneas. Shortly before Downing enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force, his mother, who had been unwell for some years, died in North Wales. Downing wrote home to say, "Bitter indeed was the realisation that never again in this life should I see the face I loved with all the tenderness a son has for the sweet mother who gently guided his footsteps in childhood and first taught him the prayers to God to whom she has returned." First sent to Egypt, Private Downing continued his training in the desert, writing, "If our training was stiff in Australia, it is more so here, but it is now drawing to a close and we daily expect marching orders for the Dardanelles and the firing line." The 25th Battalion arrived on Gallipoli in September 1915, just as the major offences had died down and the Allies were beginning to contemplate an evacuation. Nevertheless, for the men in the front line, the Gallipoli Peninsula continued to be a very dangerous place to be, with a constant threat from enemy snipers and artillery fire. In late October, the men of the 25th Battalion were in the front line near Apex, working on improving trenches and communication saps. On the 27th of October 1915, the enemy shelled the Apex and the 25th Battalion's bivouac behind the lines for 20 minutes. 4 men were killed in the bombardment, 2 at the cookhouse, and 2 when a shell splinter exploded a box of bombs. Among those killed was Private Sam Downing. The only clue we have as to which incident killed Private Downing was a letter from another Darwin man, Private Charles Allen, who wrote, "I suppose you heard of Downing's death. He was blown to pieces, poor kid. I felt very sad about it." Sam Downing is believed to have been buried not far from where he died, and after the war, the grave thought to be his was reinterred in the Embarkation Pier Cemetery. As the Imperial War Graves parties were not certain the grave belonged to Sam Downing, today he has a special commemorative headstone in the cemetery as believed to be buried in this cemetery. He was 27 years old. There were few in Australia to remember newly arrived Sam Downing after his death. Welsh newspapers published one of his last letters home, however, in which he wrote, "Should it be my lot to fall, you will know that I have not disgraced you. Indeed, had I 100 lives, I would give them all freely in order that those fair English and Australian homes should remain inviolate." The newspaper article concluded by saying, "Like a true hero, he has laid down his life, and his father, in his sorrow and depression, will be comforted by the thought that his boy was a true Briton, ready to give his life for the sake of others." Greater love hath no man, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Sam Downing's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Llewelyn Samuel Downing, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world. That's it. Yeah.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.